Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Week 10 review. It is currently Sunday, dude. I'm on top of my shit this week. I'm getting all the videos out. That means top 25 and everything. I was actually going to do my top 25 video, but I was like, you know what? Probably would be better to do the review video before my top 25 video rather than just go over games in the top 25 video and then review. That wouldn't make sense. So here we are. Without saying too much, like and subscribe, and comment. Always, let's get straight into this thing. Penn State at Ohio State. I said in my prediction video, Penn State, sometimes a new head coach can change a lot of things. But ultimately, you're entering Ohio State. I said, going into halftime, this game would be close. It would be a competitive game. After all, we had reason to believe that this was going to be the number 2 team in the nation for a good reason. Now, Drew Aller being out for the season definitely doesn't help that. And you fire your head coach, so now you're on to an interim. But ultimately, game ended up finishing off pretty close to that score. And that's kind of how the things were. Like going into halftime, it was 14-7. They had a huge 4-play, 14-yard drive right before halftime. And that put them within reason. It was just a bad fumble by Ohio State to set up an easy touchdown for Penn State. But pretty much, the second half was just completely owned by the Buckeyes. And yeah, I mean, the quarterback for Penn State just isn't that good, He definitely wasn't as bad in this game as he was in his last game that he played. And overall, running backs are all Penn State has right now, really. They got destroyed. So unfortunately, it is now Bon Jover officially for Penn State. They might not even make a bowl game. This is kind of lining up with that Texas A&M season where they finished 5-7. It's kind of on the same level, except a bit worse because Penn State was like preseason number 2 or 3. Vandy at Texas. This one honestly didn't go how I thought. I said it was going to be a Texas W in a close game, but I really thought this was going to be back and forth. Ultimately, Vandy was not competitive in this game. Going into halftime, it was 10-24. There was a point where it was 24-3. An 18-yard touchdown pass by Diego Pavia was huge. But then going out of the second half, you just don't put anything together offensively and let Texas score 10 more points. The score was 10-34. And then Vanderbilt owned the second half or the fourth quarter, getting a bunch of big plays for points. Ultimately made it, let me show you the final score. Ultimately made it 31-34. Nearly recovered the onside kick, which would have been insane if they managed to recover that. But yeah, I mean, you start off the game. Arch Manning throws a 75-yard touchdown pass. I'm not sure exactly how it looks like it was just a short pass that ended up breaking free, And then how does Vanderbilt respond? They fumble on their own 38-yard line. And then Texas uses that to kick a field goal. You're not going to go on the road and play like that and win a football game, And Texas still tried to open the door for them with a missed field goal in the fourth quarter, Tried to leave the door open, but couldn't recover the onside kick. Texas takes an easy victory. I mean, Vanderbilt only had 5 yards less than Texas, and it's just the fumble, definitely just changes the game there. Texas just played overall better football than Vanderbilt. And, that was expected. Unfortunately, for Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt fans, number 9, we all knew was too much. People that were trying to say that Vanderbilt is one of the top SEC teams kind of just going along with the hype wagon or the hype train. Like, I just never really felt like Vanderbilt being in the top 10 was right. It just wouldn't last. It's something about it is not right. This position, though, number 15, feels good where they're currently ranked right now. This feels like a good spot for Vanderbilt football. And they still should finish off a 2-loss football team, maybe even a college football playoff berth. The last 2 games or the last 3 games of the year are against fairly easy teams. Auburn just fired Hugh Freeze. Kentucky, not that good. Both of those games are at home. And then finish off against Tennessee. That's a toughie, but if you can pull that off, you're a 2-loss team. You could be college football playoff eligible. But Texas right now is on a huge turnaround. Honestly, been a little rude to Texas, all of us. Texas loses to Ohio State by 7 points. I mean, so far, that is the closest team all season to beating Ohio State. And it hasn't really been close either. It hasn't been close by any other team. Texas gave them a run for their money, played a really close game. That was enough to drop Texas to 7, which made sense. And things were not looking too good offensively for Texas. And then they lose to Florida. They lose in the Swamp. That completely kicked them out of the top 25, which at the time, everybody, is saying like Texas deserves to be dropped, myself included. But then how does Texas respond? Bounce back with a huge Oklahoma win. Road game against Kentucky in which they sneak out, doesn't look good at all. And I'm not going to make excuses for Texas. But sometimes teams just play games like that on the road where you're like, what in the world is going on with this team? And they somehow squeak it out. And sometimes they don't squeak it out, and it's a really bad loss. Sometimes shit like that just happens. Texas comes out on the happy side with the win. They go into Mississippi State, and they play 4 quarters. They are down 38 to 21. Yeah, 38 to 21 in the 4th quarter, and they don't quit on the football game. They tie it up. They win it in overtime against Mississippi State on the road. You get back up in the top 25. People are doubting you, and you beat Vanderbilt, and you beat them handily. And now all of a sudden, Texas is starting to look like a much better football team. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't look like things are going to get much brighter from here for Texas, because Texas has to play at Georgia. They got a bye week, but then they have to play at Georgia. Then they play Arkansas, and then they play A&M. Those are 2 of the best teams in the country. Good luck, Texas. If you can sneak one of those out, that would be huge, but realistically, good luck, Texas football. So yeah, that's all I got to say for this match. Miami at SMU. And man, this team looked like they were going to be the best team in the nation, man. They looked like they were going to be the best team in the nation. Carson Beck was playing so good for Miami. And then he just turned into himself from last year against whatever they're called, Louisville. 4 total turnovers from the Hurricanes. All 4 were interceptions, and you're only losing by 3 points. And then you hit the road against SMU. SMU plays a tough football game. Carson Beck doesn't play the worst game ever. I mean, SMU is underrated in a sense, in a definite sense there. But ultimately 2 interceptions, and one of them comes on the goal line in overtime. Horribly timed interception. And, earlier in the game, at the SMU 29, 4th and 1, you can't convert there. That's a horrible failure right there. The interception that they threw was at the Miami 17, led to one of them, the one in the normal part of the game, led to a free one-play 28-yard touchdown for SMU. I mean, they literally gave them this game on a silver platter. SMU even missed a field goal in the regular game, and then you get into overtime. They're driving 3rd and 6 at the SMU 7, and he throws a terrible interception. SMU doesn't even kick a field goal to end it. They just run it down their throat, and they win on the floor. SMU takes the W. Huge win for SMU. But the reality of the situation is SMU's not that good of a football team. 2 losses to middle and Big 12 teams, one of which they absolutely blew, one of which they weren't really in the game in the 4th quarter, And then most recently a 1-point loss against Wake Forest, who just got their socks blown off by Florida State. Like, they just got absolutely destroyed. I mean, SMU's not the prettiest football team ever. I like their quarterback. I like their head coach. They were obviously a college football playoff team last year, but things have changed. And Miami, with the level they were playing at, you look at Miami, a win over Notre Dame, a win over USF, a win over Florida, and a win over Florida State. Those are their best wins. Now that you look at it, their best win is Notre Dame. Their best win is Notre Dame. But when you look at it now, Miami doesn't look like they have too good of a resume. Notre Dame has 2 losses to Miami and to A&M. Very close competitive games for sure. But, Notre Dame hasn't really played anybody else other than USC, in which they picked up a win. All their other games have been against, really easy opponents, except for North Carolina State. That one looks more impressive now. I mean, USF domination, Florida domination, Florida State domination. Don't care the final score; they were up huge. And then you lose to Louisville and SMU, two teams in the SEC or in the ACC. I mean, Louisville right now, they're playing pretty good. One-loss team, they're winning football games, so you can't discredit them there. But I feel like they're extremely overrated. It just makes you wonder: is the ACC really just bad again? I mean, Virginia is up to number 12 in the country. They're 8-1, but they're winning by 1 point in overtime to North Carolina. They're beating Washington State by 2 points. A win on the road against Louisville, and the double overtime win against a good Florida State team at the time. Lost to North Carolina State. How long is Virginia going to hold on? Like, they could lose at Duke later in the season. The ACC team that goes in, I don't really know if they're going to be that competitive. Louisville has to play Cal, Clemson, at SMU, and Kentucky. They could definitely lose another game. I think, though, right now, Miami's in a horrible position. They still have some tough games left on their schedule. Syracuse is easy. They're favored by 27.5 there. NC State at Miami. No game is safe at Miami. And NC State is riding off of the most momentum they could have right now. Then after that, at Virginia Tech, kind of scary trap game. And then after that, at Pitt. Pitt is also a one-loss team in the conference. When you look at the conference standings, it's Virginia undefeated in the conference, Georgia Tech 1 loss in the conference, Pitt 1 loss in the conference, Louisville 1 loss in the conference, SMU 1 loss in the conference, and Duke 1 loss in the conference. All those teams 1 loss or undefeated. And Miami has 2 losses. That's not a good look for Miami, dude. That's not a good look. It does not look positive for them. They could be out of the college football playoff and the ACC championship. And all because Carson Beck is just inconsistent. It looked like he entered this year with a new sense of purpose, and a new team was enough to push him to that elite quarterback level. Then he dropped 4 interceptions against Louisville and a horribly timed interception in this one and a bad one that gave SMU free points. He kind of is the reason for 2 losses for this team, like the sole reason. The rest of Miami's squad is extremely good, but when Carson Beck is turning the ball over, you can't do much, man. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting couple weeks for Miami. Georgia versus Florida. How about this prediction? This was pretty close. Georgia ends up winning 24-20 in this one. But, dude, they were literally they could have scored another touchdown at the end and made it 31-20. That would have almost been perfect. They were right there, right on the 1-yard line. They were at the Florida 1-yard line. If there was just a little bit more time left on the clock, or if it was on goal, they probably would have gotten into the end zone there and, made it 31. It would have been really close, but since it didn't, ends up being 24-20. Florida played a really competitive game and ultimately didn't turn the ball over and whatnot, but there just isn't that much, there just isn't that much life in Florida anymore. Head coach is gone. Like I said before, sometimes it just takes a coaching change. We witnessed that at UCLA. Obviously, Florida played a super good game. They had a big start with a deep 40-yard touchdown play. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, it is impossible to beat Georgia right now. The only team to successfully beat Georgia was Alabama, and it's even more impossible to beat Alabama. 2 extremely good teams in the country right now. Now, Florida definitely did hurt themselves a lot getting down to the Georgia 18, 4th and 1, and not being able to convert that because they were up 20-17. You take your field goal, you can kind of put yourself in a different position later in the game, but I guess it wouldn't have really mattered. With 4 minutes and 13 seconds left, you got to keep moving down the field, but maybe it changed his game plan, not sure. But you definitely have to convert a 4th and 1. I don't mind a 4th and 1 call going for it. It's where it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3 or more. That's just kind of out of my, out of my likelihood. But 1 yard, you have got to be able to pick up 1 yard. And if you can't pick that up, that just shows the skill gap there. And ultimately that this game was really Georgia's from the start. When you can't convert 4th and 1s, it just shows the difference in talent. to me at least. And it just shows that like Florida's kind of been sleepwalking, or Georgia's been sleepwalking and making Florida feel like they're actually in this competition. Georgia takes it 24-20. Good win for Georgia there. Texas Tech at Kansas State. Just when you think Kansas State is starting to find their footing, maybe putting something better together, Avery Johnson turns into an absolute pile of shit once again. And God, I cannot wait until he is off of Kansas State. He pisses me off so bad. Ironically, they start off the game with a 46-yard Avery Johnson run. Keep in mind what I just said there. Run. That's all this guy can do. That's all he can do. That's all he'll ever be able to do. It's all he can do. I don't mean to be an absolute hater. But when you're Texas Tech first drive of the game, you get down to the Kansas State 41 and you throw an interception. Big momentum shift there. Big play. Kansas State starting off with a takeaway. One play. Intercepted. Now the defense does their job. 5 plays, 10 yards, gets a stop. Then the 46-yard touchdown play. Texas Tech goes 10 plays, 17 yards down to the Kansas State 47 where they can't convert. And on top of that, he was sacked for a loss of 14 yards. And guess what? How does Avery Johnson retaliate and respond? Incomplete pass. Incomplete pass. Incomplete pass. Incomplete pass. 4 incompletions. 0 yards. And they were down at the Texas Tech 39. He couldn't even just move the ball a little bit. Couldn't even do it. Texas Tech returns it gets the ball 3 plays, 0 yards. The Kansas State defense is playing shutdown lockdown. Now, Texas Tech goes down the field 12 plays, 79 yards. And they opt to kick a field goal at the 11. 4th and goal makes sense. How does Kansas State respond? They fumble the ball. It was kind of interesting, but it was a bad fumble. Leads to an easy Texas Tech touchdown. And then a punt, 7 plays, 17 yards. I would assume a nice punt return. Punt for 36 yards. Seems like Texas Tech also has a pretty good special teams unit. Enter the third quarter. It's 12-7 going into halftime. Very close and competitive game. Oh, let me show you my predictions. Sorry. I said 35-28. And so, 43-20 was final score. And going into halftime, the score was 12-7. So, things fell apart fast. How does Kansas State open up the second half? Another terrible fumble. And it leads to a 3-play, 49-yard drive for a touchdown to put Texas Tech up 19-7. Now, Avery Johnson leads his team down a good drive. Good drive. Texas Tech 18. It's a Avery Johnson run. It's a Avery Johnson 18-yard run for a touchdown. Yeah. It's always just short passes and runs. He did have one deep pass for 56 yards. I mean, sometimes Avery Johnson takes a shot like that. He gets a good play dialed up, and he actually delivers. And it's like, why don't they do that more? But honestly, maybe it's just Avery Johnson's capability. I'm not sure. Because, like, every time I watch Kansas State play, it's like he takes a deep shot, and it works. And then he runs the ball, and it works. But then when it just comes down to making short passes and moving the sticks, he just collapses in on himself, and he just can't move. He can't move. So he takes Kansas State down on a drive, finishes it off with another run. Texas Tech will not be denied. They go field goal. And then how does Kansas State respond? 3 and out. Texas Tech is starting to turn up the heat on this Kansas State defense. I mean, literally when you go 3 and out and instantly have to put the defense back on after a long 3-minute drive and expect them to just hold them to a field goal again, you're wrong. Avery Johnson leads his team down a 8-play, 75-yard touchdown drive. It's just big run. Avery Johnson, pass complete deep right for 38 yards. There you go, man. And then he runs the ball again for a touchdown. It was nullified, it looks like. Puts it back to 1st and goal at the Texas Tech 18. And then previous play, they caught it. 2nd and goal at the 8. 1-yard run. And then a pass. There we go. That's what I was looking for. A passing touchdown from Avery Johnson. Finally, make the game a 9-point game. I'm not really sure why they went for 2. I'm not really sure why they went for 2. I'm going to keep it real with you. Why don't you go for 2 later? But whatever. Makes it a 9-point game. And then they're 8 plays, 30 yards. They get the ball at a 4th and 1. And Avery Johnson rushed right for a loss of 6, turnover on downs. Because when it comes down to clutch time, Avery Johnson did this against Iowa State as well. I know it sounds like I'm just looking for anything to hate on right now, but there's so much to hate. I'm sorry. But seriously, when I watched Iowa State game, like, Kansas State couldn't get anything going, but the moment Iowa State would, like, jump up by 10 or something or get ahead, then he would start to play good. But when it comes down to clutch time and you need to convert the 4th and 1, rush right, -6 yards. Maybe throw the ball or something like that. Now, if it's a design run, nothing much he can do there, but that also could be lack of trust by his offensive coordinator to let him put the ball in the air because, after all, 4 plays, 0 yards, 4 incompletions. They fail there. What does Texas Tech do? They literally fumble the ball right to him. Put the ball in their hands at the Kansas State 48. Avery Johnson, pass incomplete. Avery Johnson, pass complete for 3 yards. Avery Johnson, pass incomplete. Avery Johnson, pass incomplete. 4 plays, 1 completion for 3 yards. Texas Tech 3 now. Kansas State's defense was doing great. Avery Johnson sacked for a loss of 3. Fumble. Texas Tech takes it to the house. Wrap it up. And how does Avery Johnson respond? Incomplete. 4th and 10 at the Kansas State 25. Intercepted. And then Texas Tech turns a short field into a touchdown. And they literally just start running the ball to burn the clock, and they punt it away. And Texas Tech wins. Unbelievable, man. I always felt and knew in my mind that Avery Johnson was not the quarterback for Kansas State. And I said it, man. I said it way back then, not just this year. I said it way back when Will Howard left and Avery Johnson was the quarterback supposed to take over. I just knew after his performance, all he can do is run the ball. Or maybe occasionally throw a deep pass. There's potential, don't get me wrong. I hate it when quarterbacks can't reach their potential because it just drives me mad. It's like, just hit your potential. Just what is holding you back? And this dude has so much potential, but he just can't put it together. I don't know what year he is, junior or senior, but dude, Kansas State's got to move on, man. They've got to move on past this guy. He's holding him down so bad. Sorry for this rant, but Texas Tech takes a win. Texas Tech has to play BYU next. They get to host them. Wow, why didn't we go to College Game Day that day? We went to Cincinnati, Utah, which already didn't really make much sense to me. And then we got number 8 BYU at number 9 Texas Tech, bro. That's got to be game day, man. You got to make that game day. They still might go there. I mean, it's the best matchup of the week unless they went to A&M at Missouri. But I feel like, back-to-back Big 12 matchups wouldn't hurt. But that's by far the best matchup of the week there. And Kansas State's season is over. No reason to talk about them. Oklahoma at Tennessee. Wow, this one is unbelievably annoying because Oklahoma, it's just holding on by a thread right now. They shouldn't be in the top 25. They shouldn't, honestly. I like John Mateer, and I really thought he was going to bring a whole new level of explosion to this team. And a win over ranked Michigan and ranked Auburn looked really good to start the year. They were up to number 5. I really thought they were going to be that team. Then they got dicked down by Texas. They got beat in their home stadium by Ole Miss, and this looked like it was going to drop them out of the top 25. And how did Tennessee play? 3 turnovers. They literally just gave Oklahoma points. They just gave them points. They scoop and score, which was a redonkulous play by the Oklahoma defender. Now, that's my big ish. I said Tennessee would win 34-31. That's my big ish with Oklahoma is I love their defense, man. Their defense is so good and dominant, but my God, their offense just can't put it together, and it drags the team down so bad, and I just can't stand to watch that. I can't stand to watch a really good defense be dragged down like that. That's why I want them out of the top 25. They don't deserve it. The defense does. The rest of the team doesn't. Unbelievable scoop and score. It was absolutely ridiculous. Tennessee goes down the field and makes it 10-7 at this point. It was 7-7 after an opening drive touchdown by Tennessee. 10-7, Oklahoma punts, missed field goal. You'll see that a lot from this Tennessee kicker this year. From the Oklahoma 19, I'm not really sure what happened there, but horrible miss. Oklahoma, an actual offensive drive down the field, 8 plays, 43 yards. But now that was going to be expected in this game. Tennessee's defense has not been pretty this year by any means. 10-10. 10 plays, 44 yards. You're down at the Oklahoma 36, and you get picked off. Leads to a 7-play, 26-yard drive for Oklahoma to give them 3 free points. And 4 plays, 11 yards, another interception, which leads to a 3-play, 6-yard drive, which results in a field goal. The scoreboard gets glitched here. It says 19-10. It's really 16-10 going into halftime. You know, that interception came with 48 seconds left on the clock. You just hand Oklahoma some free points. Oklahoma gets the ball in the second half, instantly punts. Tennessee goes 5 plays, 83 yards, touchdown. Oklahoma, 11 plays, 65 yards, an actual offensive drive, but they fumble the ball, man. They fumble the ball, give the ball to Tennessee, 3 plays, 1 yards. That's that defense for Oklahoma standing up tall. But when it comes down to it, the punt wasn't that good. 41-yard punt from the 11 sets up Oklahoma basically in Tennessee territory. They have half a field to move, and that's what they do. 5 plays, 52 yards. Actual offensive drive by Oklahoma. But like I said, Tennessee's defense is not that good. And this is where Oklahoma's defense just starts to stand their ground, you know. 3-play, 4-yard drive by Tennessee ends up resulting in a 9-play, 38-yard drive by Oklahoma for a field goal. Tennessee tries to move down the field. They get it on a 4th and 1, and they can't complete the pass. They fail to get the ball moving. John Mateer, interception. That's that pooper offense speaking. Leads to a touchdown drive by Tennessee. And leads to a touchdown drive by Tennessee. But at this point, you know, game is like over. You know, oh, I'm sorry. That was, never mind. Screw that. Not going back there. Leads to it's by this point, the game is practically over. Leads to a 2-play, 44-yard drive because the dude just broke a run away on Tennessee. And that pretty much put the game away. Tennessee tries to kick a field goal to make it a 6-point game. Can't recover the onside kick. Oklahoma wins. You know, those 3 turnovers at the start of the game, I mean, literally gave Oklahoma 13 points. 13 of their 33 points. A scoop and score, an interception which led to a very short field for a field goal, and an interception which was already in the short field. Didn't even need to try. Didn't even need to move the ball. They moved it 6 yards and they kicked a field goal. 13 points of Oklahoma's 33 came from just failure by Tennessee to keep the ball out of the defense's hands. And, I mean, you know, I'll give Oklahoma some credit where due. You know, their defense literally won them this game. And sometimes, you know, defense wins championships, you know. It's a good-ass thing to have a really dominant team like this. And it's a good thing that they're beating Tennessee because Tennessee obviously does not belong in the top 25. They're still in it for some reason, but they don't belong here. You know, Bears should have beaten Georgia, but they end up blowing it. They get dominated by Alabama, and then they lose in their home stadium again to Oklahoma. That's 3 big ones. Let's go ahead and kick them out of the top 25, please. They can't beat ranked teams. And, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, Oklahoma's defense is absolutely dominant. We notice. For some reason, Oklahoma's ranked ahead of Texas. Go ahead and figure. Like, that makes sense. And Tennessee's down to number 23. Washington enters the top 25. Very interesting there. I guess we're just going to keep glossing over Iowa for sure. But, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time before these teams are completely out of the top 25. Like Tennessee, later in the year at Florida, that's going to be a tough one. And then they got to play Vanderbilt. If they can win those two, you'll sit at the bottom of the top 25. Congratulations. Oklahoma is ranked at number 11 after this win. They have to go play at Alabama. Nope. Host Missouri. That might even be a tough one. And then LSU. So at the very least, Oklahoma will finish off a 3-loss team with losses to Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama, which are pretty highly ranked teams in the SEC, but still can't compete with the big dogs. You got to at least pick up one of those wins. And Michigan, Auburn, Tennessee, they're not one of those. You're solidifying yourself as a middle of the top 25 team. That's not a college football playoff team. And you know, that's even being said, they beat LSU at the end of the year. I mean, LSU is still a very good defensive team and a very highly offensive potential team. Now with a new head coach or interim head coach, maybe they figure things out. And they still have to beat Missouri in their home stadium, you know, in Oklahoma's home stadium. But the big one is at Alabama. If Oklahoma goes into Alabama, I will shut my damn mouth. That's that. I will shut up. But still, Oklahoma will at least obtain 3, maybe 4 losses. Tennessee, their schedule's a bit easier, but they could still obtain 3 to 4 losses. And these are teams that have sat at the top of the top 25 all season that could very well drop out. Very well drop out. And we don't take performance into account for our AP voting. You beat a ranked team, you move up in the rankings. How did these teams get in the top 25 in the first place? By fake preseason polls in which all the basic teams that started here are literally off of the top 25 now. I mean, seriously, it's kind of ridiculous to me. But, you know, let's just go ahead and look at the SEC picture right now. A&M, I feel like they're a lock, you know. At Missouri, you lose that. That would be bad, but then you get South Carolina and Samford. Thank God Samford's on the schedule. And then Texas. If you lose those two, I still feel like Texas A&M's resume and their wins is still good enough to be in the college football playoff, especially them only being 2 losses at that point. I feel like they're a lock. Alabama has a very nice and easy schedule for the rest of the year. I feel like they will finish off a 1-loss team. They're a lock. Georgia, at Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, and then at Georgia Tech. They could lose one, but still, I feel like they're a lock. Ole Miss, 1-loss team. They got the Citadel. Watch out. Florida at home and at Mississippi State. One of those games at Mississippi State could be a loss. They're a lock. So you look at the SEC, you got 4 teams right there that are locks. Then you've got Texas, who is trying to make their, resume better. They got to beat Georgia first at Georgia, and then later they have to beat A&M. Those are 2 losses in my eyes, not in. Oklahoma at Alabama and host Missouri. That's at least 1 or 2 losses. They're most likely not in. Vanderbilt, they could finish. They could win out the rest of their schedule. Their hardest game is at Tennessee, but I see that as winnable. They could be a team that maybe sneaks in. Tennessee, like I said, I don't see them finishing out that good. They're already a 3-loss team. They have at Florida and then Vanderbilt 4-loss. No. Missouri, A&M, you lose that one in my eyes. And then later on, you have to play at Arkansas. That could be a trap game. Host Mississippi State could be interesting. At Oklahoma, I don't know. That one's up in the air. So at least a 3-loss team there. I would say you're not in there. So when it comes down to it, you got 4 or 5 SEC teams that are potentially in the college football playoff. And, yeah, I mean, that's pretty good for the SEC, but it's a lot easier said than done. When you have infinite rankings flooding through this team or through this conference, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 teams in the SEC right now that are currently ranked. LSU, Florida, Auburn, those teams were all in the top 25 at one point. It's a very competitive conference, that's for sure. Now, they're lucky it's the 12-team playoff and not the 14 playoff. But after all, they've got a team that's dominant over the rest, and I feel like that's Alabama or A&M. Now let's look at the Big Ten actually real quick. In terms of the Big Ten, I don't see Michigan making it unless Michigan can do the impossible and somehow beat Ohio State. But I realistically don't see Michigan making the college football playoff. They're barely beating teams, and they got destroyed by USC. So I don't see them making it. Iowa, 2-loss team. You get Oregon, and then you get USC. You win those, and you win out the rest of your schedule. I feel like you could make a huge point to be in. Oregon at Iowa, got to win that. Host Minnesota, host USC, and at Washington. 2 big Pac-12 rematches at the end of the year. Watch out for those ones. Those are big Pac-12 rematches. Washington likes to win that game at the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, if Oregon wins out, they're in. I don't think they'd be in the Big Ten championship though. So you're looking at like right now. I mean, Washington 2-loss team, but they took a bad one to Michigan. They don't really play anybody, but if you beat Oregon at the end of the year, I feel like you could be one of those 2-loss teams that gets in. Yeah, bro, the picture's weird right now. The picture's super weird. I definitely could say for certain we've got 3 Big Ten teams in faux shizzle. That's like a guarantee there. Big 12, you've got BYU and Texas Tech. I feel like those are 2 locks right now. Feel like they're going to play each other in the Big 12 championship for shizzle locks. I would love to say ASU, but Sam Leavitt's done for the season. Tyson's still out. Sims, beat Iowa State on the road. Congrats, but you can't lose that one against Houston. Now, I obviously watched it. We got absolutely screwed by the refs in that game, and we do have a huge quality win over Texas Tech. But ultimately, you lose on a miracle to Mississippi State, get screwed by the refs against Houston, get absolutely dicked down by Utah. I don't see a room for ASU to get. I don't see a room for them to even get in. I don't see it. Utah, 2-loss team at Baylor, host Kansas State at Kansas. You're looking at the Big 12 championship. You just got to hope that BYU or Texas Tech loses 2 more conference games. BYU needs to lose 3 for Utah to get up there. Who else did Utah? Oh, they lost to Texas Tech and BYU. Houston, I would say no. I would say they're done. So you can't lose to West Virginia in your home stadium. Cincinnati got exposed by Utah. They got absolutely destroyed. Later in the season, they have to play BYU. No bueno. Nope, not happening. So I feel like BYU and Texas Tech are 2 absolute locks right now. Utah is hoping that one of them collapses. I mean, overall, if Baron Morton gets hurt, it could be Bon Jover for Texas Tech because the backup is hurt for the season. So if Baron Morton goes out, there's really no telling who comes in and plays. But there is only 3 games left in the season. BYU, or I guess for Texas Tech there's 4 games left for BYU. Texas Tech, TCU, Cincinnati, and UCF. So it looks like there's 2 Big 12 teams that are absolutely locked and loaded. And ACC, that's maybe 1. Maybe 1, man. I don't know. The whole picture's looking weird. But let's finish up the review video. I have been yapping. USC and Nebraska. I said USC would win this one on the road. Nebraska would be playing a very competitive football game, but lose it in typical Nebraska fashion. So it actually stayed much lower scoring than I would have expected. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and look at the statisticals over here. USC led in yards by 50. Both teams had 1 turnover. Both teams failed a 4th down conversion. Very even matchup. Absolutely perfect. 49 yards of penalties for USC, 45 for Nebraska. Both teams had 20 first downs. USC was 6 for 14 on 3rd down efficiency. Nebraska was 5 for 12. It's as even gets, and somehow Nebraska is losing the football game. A missed field goal by Nebraska. I don't see a missed field goal for USC, but yeah, missed field goal definitely hurts there. Is that the downs? No, the downs came at the end of the game. Yeah, can't convert a 4th and 1. You lose in typical Nebraska fashion. That's all there is to it. Cincy at Utah. Needed I say more? Utah is just a running football team. Oops. What did I just do? Utah is a running football team, man. They just run the ball so damn efficiently. They're up to number 17. And that's really largely why it's a large reason why they dominate most of their games. And when they lose games, they lose them by not putting up many offensive points. The Texas Tech game, Utah's got a horrible history of backup quarterbacks coming in and just ruining the fun. That game was 10-13 in the fourth, and then it just all collapsed in front of Utah. They lost it. They just lost control of it. Turnovers were a huge effect in that game as well as in the BYU game. A couple more things go Utah's way in these games, and you can see completely different outcomes. And aside from that, they've absolutely dominated the rest of the Big 12. I mean, it's literally a giant skill gap. ASU 42-12, West Virginia 48-14, Colorado 53-7, Cincinnati 45-14. It's a skill gap. There's a gigantic barrier between teams next to Utah. And it just sucks that Utah loses both of those teams because I feel like they're super underrated. I do feel like Utah could potentially be a team to sneak into the college football playoff if they finish off a 2-loss team with dominating performances over the remaining teams. You go into Baylor and win like 45-14. You go play Kansas State, win like 52-10, and beat Kansas like 63 or something. I feel like you make a damn good reason to be in. And I mean, 5 spots away from being in that 12 spot is not very far. Louisville could lose. Virginia could lose. Oklahoma, all these teams could lose and potentially lead Utah in. I feel like they're a sleeper team to get in to the college football playoff. But that is the last video, or the last game of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Oh, well, something before I would like to just go ahead and wrap this up is the fact that Utah's winning this game 45-14. Yet, Cincinnati is literally only 50 yards off of offensive production. Both teams Cincinnati had 3 turnovers, Utah had 2. It's just things played out better for Utah. I mean, they just dominated the time of possession. They had the ball for 40 minutes compared to Cincinnati's 20. That's what happens when you're a running football team and you run the ball efficiently. 16 plays, 94 yards for Utah. That's how they start off the game. 16 plays, 94 yards, a 7-minute drive. Cincy responded well. 7 plays, 75 yards by Utah, quicker drive. But this is exactly what happened to ASU, and this is what happened to Cincinnati. You miss a field goal on a good drive, you hand over the momentum. And then what does Cincinnati do after that? They fumble the ball. And when you do stuff like that in Utah Stadium, it's going to collapse in front of you very hard. And it did. It got 24-7 very quickly. And it just wasn't very close from that point on. Cincy, 2 plays, 88 yards, got a quick, easy touchdown. But the defense was just shutting down Cincinnati, and then it just blew up. It just blew up in front of them. And, yeah, it got bad fast. And, yeah, I would say Utah is a college football playoff-worthy team, in my opinion. But with that being said, that is all for this video. A like and subscribe, and a comment always helps. That's all for me. Adios.